medical examiner, they said 1 in a trillion confidence that the highest DNA was, who was it?
On the gun.
Who was it?
Not the trigger.
Who was
There's
it?
a difference.
Who was it?
No, on the trigger.
Who was? Can you just
Tyler
answer?
Robinson.
Why can't you just answer who it was? Who was it?
Okay, Jake or Rob. By the way, whichever one of you guys wants to jump in on this, all good, no problem. Because I want to get into the specifics of the debate. So the first element of the debate was that Andrew Wilson was attempting to prove that there was overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson was the shooter. What's your, and there was a few key things that he mentioned, and then I want you to also address Joe's point about the 75-85%. The other, and then do add to this as well, because this might not be an exhaustive list. Andrew Wilson mentioned the text messages, he mentioned the visual, the CCTV camera, which he said was evidence that this was Tyler Robinson. What's your thoughts about the, first of all, individual evidences which demonstrate that point, and B, how well do you think Andrew did in order to kind of cover those issues? And you had Joe saying that, look, by saying 75 to 85%, you're already conceding that beyond, it's not Tyler Robinson beyond reasonable doubt. So what's your answer to all
right. First, let me just say, to respond to both the doctor and Joe. First, I do thank everyone for being here. I think the most important thing that we heard there was, quote, she provided no evidence in the debate. Yes, you heard that right. Joe admitted, quote, she provided no evidence. And the doctor said, I second everything he just said. Then he proceeded to give a laundry list of things Candace has said on her show that he thinks is correct. Nothing that was debated in this debate. So in other words, what he's saying is, I had a preconceived notion that Candace was right. And even though she presented no evidence in the debate, I still think she won because I just agreed with Candace when I walked in. Thank you. I appreciate the admission. You are correct. Candace Owens presented no evidence at all for her theory that there's overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson was set up. Secondly, when it comes to this issue of fracturing, which is important, I think there are things Trump done that hasn't perfect. He hasn't gone 180 against every promise. He promised that he would secure the border. He did that. You might not like the amount of deportations, but there you go. There's proof he didn't go 180 against everything. So what we see is there are people on the right like Candace that are furthering fracturing the right. Do I think they'll be the most important reason if Republicans lose? No, I think the failures of Trump and Republicans largely are more to blame, but it doesn't help when you have even people like Hassan Piker going, thank you so much, Candace. You're really doing yeoman's work, fracturing the right for us, and it's working for so many people that are going to cede power to the Democrat. This claim of 75%, I'll hit that really quick. That's because it wasn't the point of Andrew Wilson to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Tyler Robinson did this. And here's the best part. Neither is it on the burden of the state to this point. All they had to do was prove probable cause. There is tons of evidence that the state has claimed in official filings that they have, such as cell phone data from things like Google Maps that prove location, that they haven't released yet. And the reason they haven't released it yet is because they don't need to yet. The defense had every incentive in the world to try to get this case thrown out by talking about literally any one of the theories that Candace has talked about. For example, they could say, look, this photo stretched out shows it wasn't Tyler Robinson. They didn't do that. They could say Tyler Robinson's parents never actually said all this stuff. The family friend lied about it all. They never talked to Tyler Robinson and said, that looks like you, and he said, I'm going to end my life, and implied he did it. They didn't. They could have said, it's clear that Lance Twiggs was the one who wrote the Discord messages. They didn't do that. They said none of these theories that Candace is talking about. Andrew is well within his rights to say 75 to 80% because he's not hyperbolic. When he said that there's overwhelming evidence, he means at this point in a trial, before we get to the trial. Normally it's a grand jury, and sometimes it's in like Utah, where we have these probable cause hearings. What we have at this point in almost every other murder trial is far less than what we know about Tyler Robinson. And the evidence is compelling and almost overwhelming. I would say it is overwhelming at this point. I, just like Andrew, admit, Once the defense has the chance to provide their case to defend against reasonable doubt that there's reasonable doubt, maybe they'll be able to do it. And maybe I'll say, in my opinion, I think there's reasonable doubt. I don't think he should be convicted. That's entirely possible. Same is true of Andrew, who admitted that. On the other hand, Candace said 0% chance Tyler Robinson did this. That means that's not ambiguous. That means there is no evidence ever that could be presented that will convince her Tyler Robinson did it. If Tyler Robinson confesses, won't matter. If the steakhouse come back and says that wasn't his receipt, it won't matter to Candace. If Tyler's parents come out and say, yep, everything that was alleged that he told us absolutely was said, it won't matter. And so the person, Candace, gets rewarded for being hyperbolic and saying, actually, it's 0%. That's nonsense. He made the case. He did talk about things like, in his opening statement, he talked about the witness testimony. He talked about the confessions. He talked about the ballistics, etc. Candace barely brought up no evidence against the case. She was like, well, it's hearsay. She's not right about that. The written confessions aren't hearsay. That's not hearsay. And hearsay still allowed. Remember, Candace is making the affirmative claim that there is more evidence that Tyler Robinson set up as a patsy. You might say, well, I don't think they should be allowed to use this evidence in trial because it's a hearsay. But she listens to hearsay all the time. With her theories, some anonymous source told me they heard X. She accepts that. So why is she unwilling to accept the state when they're saying Tyler Robinson's lover told us this? Tyler Robinson's parents said this. She completely rejects it. My point is this. It's perfectly reasonable at this point, before the state tried to provide evidence beyond a reasonable doubt, to still have a reasonable doubt. No one blames you. I still have reasonable doubt, but the evidence at this point is overwhelming, and Candace is claiming it's overwhelming that actually he's a patsy by the feds, and as our opposition here, Joa, and his partner admitted, she provided exactly zero evidence for that during the debate.
Solomon, can I just correct, because he's reframing what I'm saying. What I'm saying
Yeah,
is,
go ahead. Go ahead.
She didn't have to provide evidence, because when she brought it up, Andrew conceded, right? So she never actually had to show, for example, the ATF report from the court. So she didn't have to show it, because Andrew would say, okay, even if that's true, and she would say, but it is true, she said it. And he's like, okay, but I'll concede. So every time she brought up evidence, Andrew conceded. So she didn't have to show proof. So don't try to reword, because I don't even believe all her theories. Number one, I'm 40-60, 40% he didn't do, 60% he did. So don't also try to make it seem like I agree with everything Candace says. That's also not true. Right?
Two things real quick.
Trying to frame it as she didn't have to present anything because Andrew conceded over and over and over again.
That's not true. One, two things real quick. When he would concede, he would say, even if that's true, that doesn't prove that it's evidence against the state's case in this sense. And he would provide the explanation. And second, just to prove the point, can you give me one piece of evidence she proved for her burden of the topic? And I'm quoting now, there is overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson was a patsy set up by the feds. Give me the evidence that
Rob,
you're claiming
Rob,
she had that
Rob,
he
we're going to
conceded.
come to that one second, because I want to section this out, because I feel like it's too... it's a bit too scattergun. So I want to, if this is okay with everyone, I want to deal with specifically Andrew Wilson's position, which is that there's overwhelming evidence that it was Tyler Robinson, and then after that we'll deal with that. Is that okay with you guys? Or if you want to, we can do it scattergun, but I just feel like we're just not going to get anywhere if we just do a scattergun style. What do you think, Jake and Rob? And Joa?
That's fine.
Yeah,
I don't mind.
Just Suleiman, just lead the way.
I think
I was going to debate Rob at one point. I didn't realize he talked this much, though. This is crazy.
Yeah, I'm quite a talker. That's how I lost my voice debating.
No, it's no problem. It's no problem. I like it when people elaborate on their position, but just if we could make it a bit more concise, because we'll never get through all the different points. But no problem. I like the fact.
Can I just say this real quick, Suleiman, and I promise I'll be quiet. Andrew didn't concede any points that showed the state's evidence isn't true. He would say, even if I accept that would be the case, it doesn't prove that this wasn't true any more than when Candace later concedes. You're right. I would.
Did to the DNA,
please let me finish.
He literally said I concede.
Please let me finish. We could talk about degraded DNA any more than when Candace said, I concede that I was wrong, that Lance Twig's DNA was on the rifle. Does that mean she conceded she lost that portion of the debate? She said, I concede I was wrong. So that means she lost, right, Joe?
Yeah, but she because she was wrong about one thing, she conceded once. Andrew conceded like 5 times.
No, he didn't concede on anything.
He definitely lost.
He didn't concede on anything that
he
disproves
granted it.
his
He
case.
granted it for the sake of debate.
Correct.
It's a different thing. Do you know what the
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
is, Joa?
but
Yeah, that's
Jake,
what
but
Joe had
granting,
mentioned.
granting the fact that it's there when something's a fact of the testimony from the ATF, which he didn't know, he pushed back against, and he's like, let me grant it. He's not granting. That is evidence. That is true. She brought up evidence. She didn't have to pull it up because Andrew would always say, I'll grant it. So
What
she
was the
doesn't
specific
pull up
grant?
any
It
of
for
her
the sake of
claims.
debate. He granted it for the sake of debate, and then his
No, he
argument here
granted
was
it because he
how-
was
so I'm
wrong.
just going to
He
finish the
granted it
statement.
because he was wrong, Jake.
I'm going to finish the statement, and then you can respond. So he granted it for the sake of the debate, and then he says, "Well, even if we grant that, how do you get to the inference there that he is a patsy?" So that was the line of questioning that was happening there. So she was saying that she was 0% convinced that Tyler Robinson was a patsy, 0%. So that would mean that it's more logically possible that every single pigeon in New York is secretly employed by the government, but none of them have ever been caught because they communicate exclusively through synchronized head movements. So, I mean, if she's 0% sure that Tyler Robinson pulled the trigger, she has to provide evidence for that. So even if you do grant that, if that's her primary piece of evidence that she's attacking, how would that logically infer that he is a patsy? That's what she had to get through there. And that's why, for the sake of debate, sometimes you have to grant these things.
Yeah, but Jake, first off, you can't grant something that's state evidence, right? It's state evidence. ATF officer said that. Okay, that Jake's
Okay, but
DNA
then
was
it's
the
the
most
logical
degraded,
inference, yeah.
and
It's
he
logical
also
inference.
she also brought up the fact that there's dust in the barrel, right? And if it's his gun that's in the woods, and it's not his DNA that was the last one to pull the trigger, which is what this is inferring, then he's a patsy. I mean, it's not that difficult, and I don't know why you guys harped on the fact that prove it's a patsy, prove it's a patsy. It's his gun that's left in the woods, and it's not his DNA on the trigger. It's most degraded on the trigger. It's not hard to make the jump of why it's a patsy. That's why she said, I can explain it to you, but I can't understand it for you, because it's a ridiculous argument that doesn't that couldn't prove. That's not evidence showing he could be a patsy. Does it have to be beyond a reasonable doubt? No, she's questioning the evidence, which she should, and so should you guys, which you yourself said you're not 100% convinced yet.
Okay, real quick,
Right,
can you
and then
show me
to add to that,
Uncle
Rob,
Tom,
you spoke a lot. To add to that, there was no. She did talk about the images, right? She went through Andrew's tweets that he's been tweeting. There was no images because he's appealing to some video images. Tyler getting out of this vehicle. So it hasn't been. It's not conclusive that that's the vehicle. It's not conclusive that that's Tyler. If you have something, Rob and Jake, if you have images of Tyler between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. on UVU campus, please put that in the purple pill. We can take a look at it. But that is also going to be evidence that he is a patsy. That would be evidence if the person that all the influencers, she also mentioned this as evidence. She didn't go into great detail, but I can for you. K Interactive, allegedly, this company that will propagate this messaging, which included in that is Benny Johnson, Jack Posobiec, Libs of TikTok. So all your usual suspects, Talmud Tatum, all of them allegedly have this same messaging, and that can also, you can infer from that, like this propaganda campaign, you can infer that, hey, this may not be the guy that's pulled the trigger, because why is everybody all of a sudden saying this is the guy who did it? We've seen him in 4K. So she did mention this, but it was kind of like overlooked a little bit.
Okay, first off, can either of you provide me evidence that when someone is the overwhelming largest amount of DNA, if it's degraded, that means they weren't the last person to handle the gun? Can either of you provide me evidence of that?
Here, what I can tell you is
Just evidence on that claim. Thanks.
It's a family. Hello, it's a family heirloom. Obviously, his DNA and prints are going to be on the gun. That doesn't prove. So by using Andrew's standard, then show me he pulled the trigger. Show me he shot the guy. You can't show that. You can't even infer that because he's obviously going to. And as a matter of fact, his DNA should be all over. If you put a gun by your ball sack, especially you, Rob, like you seem a little bit heavy set there, you're gonna get DNA all over this firearm. So it's between your thighs and shit. So obviously, it just alone being his firearm, he's going to have all of this on the gun. So I don't know why that's such a gotcha. I'm not sure why everybody's like looking at this like in this way.
Well, Tom, for someone that knows nothing, you awfully talk a lot. Also interested that you talk about my physique while talking about my balls. Wasn't really looking for a gay guy to comment my genitals here, but thanks so much for offering. Anyways, you'll notice that he didn't answer the question because anyone who looks into DNA knows that you will not find literature that says that if the DNA is more degraded, that proves they weren't the last person to handle the gun. Tom instead makes a second claim. His claim is, well, of course his DNA's on the gun. It's a family heirloom. Well, right, but we have all this evidence that's pointing in the direction of Tyler Robinson, including the image of...
Just name it. Slow down, Rob.
Tom, please. You talked a lot. I know you're fascinated by my genitals. Please sit down and listen.
What's all the evidence,
Tom,
though?
Please,
you keep
be quiet.
All the evidence.
Please, Tom,
right,
be
Tom,
quiet. I know
Tom,
you're
let
obsessed
him
with my
take his point.
genitals and you're really trying to get in my pants. But please, calm
Okay.
down and listen. Now, the state has made the case that all of
Brian
the evidence...
Shapiro 2.0 over here.
The state made the case that all of the evidence points in the same direction. We have the confession of him 4 different times, so they had the confession. We had the statements from his parents saying, that was one of those confessions saying they thought it looked like him. They called him. He said, no, it wasn't me. Then dad called him and he started crying and said, I'm going to end my life, and implied that he did it.
You don't have that evidence.
We do have that evidence. We have the prosecution.
No, you don't
Please,
have that evidence.
Joa,
It's not
just
being
grant
presented
it.
to
Please,
anyone.
please.
Joa, grant it. Rob, we're granting it. I'll grant
Thanks.
that he wrote
He's
all of
conceded.
that. Now show me he pulled the
Conceded.
trigger.
Conceded. Thank you so much. So the way that this often happens is we can imagine the burden that they're setting up here when we have the photographic evidence that shows it was likely him, his confessions that shows it, people that know him saying that looks like him. We had other things such as the police noticing the plates on his car, both when they pulled into campus and when they tried to retrieve the gun. We have all this evidence that's all pointing in the same direction. Now, the burden that Tom would put here would be this. If we had video evidence of someone walking into a barber shop, and then we didn't have video evidence in there, but there were gunshots and someone died, and the gun's dropped on the floor, and the gun has the DNA of the guy we just saw in video evidence walk in, and that guy admitted, yeah, it was me. Tom would say, but wait a minute, there's more than one person's DNA on the gun. Therefore, we can't make an inference that he pulled the trigger. There was a famous case in the 80s where they convicted a man of murder who we didn't even have a body from. And the reason was, all we had was evidence that there was a shitload of blood that was found in his yard, and he had just rented a wood chipper. So they tested the blood and found that it was his wife's. They put 2 and 2 together even though they didn't find a body, and were able to provide enough circumstantial evidence to convict him. When we have all of this evidence that's pointing in the same direction, of course, because there's other family members that handled this gun because it's a family heirloom, we're not expecting the father. We have no evidence to suspect him. We're not suspecting the grandfather. What it proves is that someone in one of those 5 prints put that gun there. Someone with Tyler Robinson's DNA in his house put the screwdriver there. Someone in Tyler Robinson's house put the towel there. We have overwhelming evidence that points to that person was Tyler Robinson. And what you all want to do is say, unless we see something in 4K of him pulling the trigger, we can't draw the inference that it was Tyler Robinson. That is absurd. That's never how these trials have worked.
Joe, Darkside, Trillion, or Uncle Tom, jump in. Anybody wants to respond? Because,
Well, in
Yeah,
case
I'll
he
take this.
doesn't know, Amanda Knox was let go because of degraded DNA. So for him to say, show me a case where that's true. Well, one of the most famous cases of an American outside of America, which is Amanda Knox, she was found not guilty because of the degraded DNA, which came to overturn the fact that she was found guilty initially because of it. And when they finally got American DNA specialists on it and looked at it, she was let go. So you have just one. I can give you many of them, by the way. And then you also conflate that you have the messages. No, you don't have the messages. What you have is a charging doc, which is written by the prosecution, that if anyone wants to go to an AI and say, is it common for a charging document to stretch the truth? It is very common for it to stretch the truth. And you don't have the actual messages. They were supposed to provide the data. The judge told them to provide the data, and they said they couldn't do it reasonably. Right? What does that mean? Why do they not have the metadata from the messages? The defense should have had it. They requested it, and they still don't have it. So for you to say that we have evidence of the messages, no, you don't. You have the prosecution's interpretation of the messages.
That's
I'm
not
sorry,
true.
That's hearsay.
Also,
That is
just
hearsay.
quickly,
That's
let me
not-
say
that's
with
1,000,000% true.
With the Amanda Knox case, I think that it's like a false equivalence here, because with the Amanda Knox case, you also have a black man who fled out the window, who was with her in the house and who robbed the house, and then literally jumped out of the window. His DNA was all over the place. And then basically she got arrested because he said that he saw her. So it's a little bit different. You have another person with a criminal record on the scene who literally fled out the window, who had his DNA all over the place.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
and
a
you have
little
Lance
bit of-
Twiggs,
little bit
whose
of a
entire
different
family
case
says
there.
that it sounds a lot more like Lance Twiggs would do it. His own family are saying
they-
that his
so they
DNA
feel
is
like it?
also all over the place, but you're negating that.
His
right?
DNA,
This isn't
real
just-
quick,
This
if-
isn't just. This isn't just Amanda Knox. You have David Butler in the UK. You have Lucas Anderson in California. There's multiple cases where degraded DNA actually found the person not guilty because of it.
That's
And what
different.
Rob
If I
said-
may,
what Rob
Degraded
said
DNA.
is
If
find
it-
me
if it-
one case where that's
not
true.
what I said.
I just named 3.
That
and
is
you
not
guys
what I
can't
said.
concede that I was correct.
That's not what I said, and you misnamed things. Amanda Knox wasn't let go because of degraded DNA. Amanda Knox was let go because there was possible contamination of the DNA, and there was extremely low qualities of DNA. So I'll ask you a couple questions in rapid succession. One, who had the highest amount of DNA on the rifle?
The rifle doesn't matter. Of course, it's going to be
Why can't
him.
you
What's
answer?
important is the trigger.
Wait.
The trigger
Who
is
had
what's important.
who
So
had the
don't
highest?
conflate it.
Let me finish. Can you answer for the audience in case they don't know? According to the medical examiner, they said 1 in a trillion confidence that the highest DNA was. Who was it?
On the gun.
Who was it?
Not the trigger.
Who was
There's
it?
a difference.
Who was it?
No, on the trigger.
Who
it
was?
wasn't-
Can
it
you
wasn't
just
Tyler
answer? Why
Robinson.
can't you just answer who it was? Who was it?
Because it's his gun. It's
Who-
a stupid question.
who was it? Who
you
was
think
it?
You have a got me, and it's not a got me.
Okay, so he
on
won't
the gun
answer.
itself.
Let me. So
on the gun itself, it is Tyler
Thank you
Robinson.
so
On
much.
the
So-
trigger, he has the least.
So
of
that,
5 people.
So again, so what you can see is in Amanda Knox, there was almost none of her DNA. On the gun, it was actually overwhelming 1 in a trillion. He had the most DNA. Second,
Not on the
let me finish.
trigger.
Let me finish. Secondly, I didn't ask you name another case. I said, does the literature suggest, can you show me anywhere where the literature suggests that the person with the most degraded DNA wasn't the last person to touch the gun? Can you show me that? Can you show me? Because I'm reading the exact opposite from medical literature, that actually the status of the degradation of the DNA doesn't speak to who was the last person to touch the gun. So can you provide me evidence to the contrary?
Can I
Anyone?
go subpoena the gun and run my own test, Rob?
It's not.
a
No.
ridiculous standard.
That's not the question. It's not. You need to subpoena the gun. It's a question of you're saying if the degradation was the most of Tyler Robinson, that proves he couldn't have been the last person to touch the gun. I'm telling you, I'm
I
reading
didn't
medical
say it
literature.
proves. I'm saying it could be, and you guys are saying it's positive.
Well, it could be.
Tyler Robinson. When we're saying there's many things, you can't prove the bullet that was fired. You can't match the casing to the actual gun. The trigger doesn't have his the least degraded. The car witness, the woman across the street said it was actually an old guy that was bald that got out of the car, not Tyler Robinson. And
We're
his
just
own
scalping
roommate,
points
lover,
now.
His lover says he
Look,
can't.
that's not what they do.
can't-
They just
he can't identify.
a bunch of different.
Okay,
points.
Scalping.
if
I
I
let
can-
you guys
You
speak,
guys
and
need
you
to
guys are
provide
talking
the
over
debate.
me.
Look.
You
Let me
guys are
just bring it
talking
back for
over
a
me.
second.
That
Can we
is
bring it back?
Let's hear from
disgusting,
Jake. Let's
Nice
hear from
try,
Jake.
though.
Okay,
yeah.
guys,
Look,
quiet 1 second. Everybody,
I haven't
just really
spoken that
quiet.
much.
Apologies. Just everyone, let one person go. Go ahead, Jake.
Yeah,
That's
look,
fine.
I mean, we need to bring it back here because here's what the debate was about. Candace Owens had to provide overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson was a patsy who was set up by the federal government. That's what the debate was, okay? So she then said that she was 0% sure it was Tyler Robinson, and this was her big piece of evidence. What we've got
That's
here
what
is all
you
of these
say the
guys-
debate was. That's not the debate. That's ridiculous standard.
I'd just prefer it if you'd be quiet, if I'm totally honest. But
I'm
basically,
sure
yeah,
your side
interrupting.
does.
Now he's
Yeah.
interrupting.
1 second,
just
let
like
Jake-
Let's just
Andrew
let
was
Jake go.
interrupting.
Let
Okay,
Jake go.
let's just
Okay,
rein
drop
it in.
this guy while this guy
Let's
talking.
just-
Okay, I dropped him. Go ahead, Jake. Finish your point.
Yeah. So, so she had to provide overwhelming evidence that he was a patsy set up by the United States government. What we've got going on here is basically just a bunch of feels again. Rob is asking these guys, how can they provide this logical inference? How can they prove that even if there was degraded prints on the gun, that first of all, Tyler Robinson wasn't the last to handle it, and especially because his prints are the most prominent on the gun, how would you then infer that, first of all, he wasn't the last person to hold the gun or to pull the trigger. You can't actually infer that. It's a logical leap that doesn't make sense. And then beyond that, you then have to infer that he was a patsy. And then beyond that, you have to infer that he was a patsy set up by the federal government. And then beyond that, you have to prove that he was a patsy set up by the federal government beyond reasonable doubt. That's what the debate was about. So anything that you hear from these people trying to say how she won the debate when that was the claim that she had to substantiate is just absolutely ridiculous. And it just kind of shows how far we've fallen, to be honest. But go ahead, guys. Tell me how you feel.
So let me read out, which apparently I've been sent this by Trillian. I think this is from Andrew Wilson's team. This is specifically what the debate topics were. So claim 1 is there is overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson shot and killed Charlie Kirk. Claim 2, there is overwhelming evidence that Tyler Robinson did not kill Charlie Kirk and is being set up as a patsy. So those were the two claims. Who wants to respond?
By the federal government, yeah.
It doesn't actually say that.
It does not say by the federal
You
government.
made that up. Hold on, let me tell you.
Can I take a swing, Sully? Let Trillian go. Let Trillian go.
I talked to Enigmatic for hours yesterday. This prompt is the most important thing here. First thing Andrew does is he overrides the word overwhelming with convincing or compelling, or something like that. That's not what that word means. Overwhelming means beyond, meaning there's so much to convince me that you could take things off and I would still be convinced. They wanted a different prompt. They wanted the fact that there is more evidence to substantiate Tyler killed Charlie than that he is a patsy. They got this. The patsy argument that Candace had to defend actually put her at a severe disadvantage. It doesn't say set up as a patsy by the American government. You completely made that up. But as far as this prompt goes, think about it. The evidence that they're discussing is to support charges that the state has levied. They're going to collect evidence to those ends. They're not going to collect any kind of evidence. The way you can overwhelming evidence versus compelling evidence. Let's say I saw, let's use Tom, right? Let's say Tom wears a particular set of shoe. I saw somebody rob a bank. The person had the exact same shoes. That is convincing evidence that it could have been Tom, right? It's convincing. It could have happened, but it's not overwhelming. The fact that Tom then provides an alibi of being in a different state at a different time is the same amount of evidence, but it's now overwhelming that he wasn't there. So the purpose of this whole patsy thing, just so everybody's on the same page, is that he was taken advantage of, tricked essentially, to be at that campus to catch this charge. The fact that people think that this is an impossibility, guns have been planted in plenty of cases. All right, so let's just get the actual prompt straight here. And there is a difference between compelling, overwhelming, more, right? These are all different things.
Yes, I agree. I accurately
Just
said
quickly,
almost.
if that is the case, with that wasn't a part of the prompt, then yeah, I apologize for that if it wasn't by the government.
I absolutely said definitively.
I'm fine with saying the government, though. I mean, a patsy kind of does imply that.
Right.
I would say.
It
Guys,
doesn't
a
lie. If that
patsy
wasn't a
is
part of
a
the prompt, then I got
useful
that wrong.
idiot.
Yeah.
If I may.
A patsy is a useful idiot.
If I may.
That's taken advantage of to be a scapegoat in a crime or anything else.
If I may, it is clear I accurately said what the prompt was, and I was absolutely correct, as we've now received from Suleiman, that came directly from the actual contract, that was what the prompt was. You saying that this puts her at a disadvantage, that was her claim. She originally, again, the purpose that Andrew wanted to do this debate was to get her to defend her wild theories. No one who makes these theories wants to defend it. She put as a precondition that Andrew had to defend that one point he said the evidence was overwhelming. When he said that, he meant it was overwhelming at this point in a case. Before we even have the trial, we almost never have this much evidence being suggested of who's guilty at this point. That's what he was talking about. She insisted he defend the term overwhelming, seeing as how she has publicly said that the evidence is overwhelming, that he's been set up as a patsy by the feds. The question was, why shouldn't you have to defend that, is your theory. She agreed. You being upset that puts her at a disadvantage, and she was incapable of even presenting one piece of evidence to suggest that, as was admitted by Joa, that she provided, and I quote, he said, she provided no evidence. I absolutely agree. We'll get to that portion of the debate in a minute. Now, to speak to this question of degradation, I'll ask Joe this question very quickly. We're going one by one on these issues. He says that she made a case about DNA degradation that Andrew granted by the ATF. What he was granting was, even if it was the most degraded, that doesn't prove that he didn't handle the gun or he wasn't the last person to handle the gun. I have two questions for you real quick, Joe. You said, well, it could be if it's degraded the most, he wasn't the last person. One, if his was the least degraded, could it be that he wasn't the last person to handle the gun?
Both could be true.
Right. So then what's even the point of bringing it up? The degradation of the DNA speaks nothing to who handled the gun.
There's a point because there are previous case law
Please.
which shows the person was let go because of it.
No, you're wrong.
why.
In the one case you cited,
I'm not wrong. I
please,
just
I would-
named I named 4 people that you said none exist.
You
and I named the
just
cases.
misstated the
And
Amanda
on top
Knox
of it,
case.
You keep saying
You
I
just-
said that she didn't have to present evidence. She didn't because Andrew conceded all the time.
Again,
That's why
what
she
I'm
didn't have to present
what I'm
evidence.
saying is she presented no evidence to her claim, as you admit. You just say he conceded. He said, "What's your evidence?" She provided none for her portion of the topic. No,
She
the
started
states,
to talk
please.
about it, and Andrew would just
Please.
say, "I concede that."
No,
I'll
he
grant
didn't.
that. I'll
So
grant
she
that.
said,
I'll
so
concede that.
he said, "What's your evidence that Israel did it?" And she said, "Well, let me give you the evidence." He said, "I concede Israel did it." Can you show me what the timestamp was where he said that? Oh, never mind. You're
Why are you
making that
talking
up.
about one thing? You straw man like no one I've ever seen
Name
in my
me.
entire life.
We're going
honestly.
to get to the portion where she had to defend that he was a patsy. You keep saying, well, he conceded all the points she made. She didn't make any points. Now, what I'm saying is, I
She
never
did.
asked
She
you.
talked about the
I
DNA,
never-
talked about the barrel.
That wasn't her
talked about
saying
the
that he was a
messages,
patsy. That was
and
her.
He conceded all of them.
That was
all
her
of them. He granted.
That was her casting doubt on the state's evidence. That doesn't prove that the FBI is intentionally setting him up as a patsy. That's just saying, well, maybe there's reasonable doubt to his guilt. Now, the question I asked you was, you made the
Yeah,
claim.
and that's the way I
Please.
took the debate.
You made the claim that the DNA being most degraded meant he wasn't the last person to handle the rifle. You now are forced to admit that's not the case. And now you're saying you asked me for cases I never did.
But that's
And
not what I
let me-
said. You keep
would you
putting
please
words in
just,
my mouth,
it'll be
Rob.
much simpler. I promise. I'll sit here quietly
Well,
while
it's
you
not
talk
simple
as
when
I
you keep
have.
putting words in people's mouths.
That is what
that's
you
the problem.
said. You're the one putting words in my mouth. And as I try to explain, I didn't say the words you were saying. You continue to interrupt. I never said, show me cases. I said, can you show me, does the literature say if it's the most degraded, that means he wasn't the last person to handle? You concede now that that's not the case. You bring up other cases and say this was thrown out because of DNA degradation. That's not true. There were other factors such as contamination and such as there not being that much DNA. You already conceded.
You're familiar with all 4 cases I mentioned?
Let me finish.
You're
The
familiar
one-
with all 4
the
cases
one-
I mentioned.
the
Rob,
one
just
ca-
answer this. I haven't asked you a single question.
Holy
Are
shit.
you familiar with all 4 cases I mentioned that you just made that statement?
No, I prevent you. I welcome you to provide.
Exactly. So thank you. You're bullshitting on stage because
Okay.
you don't even know the cases.
But what about the case of Viaz v. Diaz, where it said that degradation is never a reason to throw out the case? Are you familiar with that case?
Yes, you have.
You're familiar
evidence
with
both
Diaz
ways.
versus
I'm not
Riaz.
familiar with that case, but you
Oh,
have evidence
okay.
both ways.
There we
but
go.
you have
There we go.
cases which you said don't exist, and
There
they
we go.
do.
I
exist.
never said cases don't exist. You're putting words in my mouth. I never
You
said there.
did, and you
No,
just
I
you
didn't.
just said that there's
No.
multiple factors of why these cases were let go, and then you admit you don't even know the cases.
You just admitted you don't know the case.
understand
You just
how much full of shit you are.
You
Dude,
just
you gotta
admitted-
take your head out of your ass.
You
and pull
just
the shit
admitted,
out of your
okay,
ears.
if the moderator's
Because
going to
I
allow
don't-
the
I don't
interruptions,
get
I
it.
assure you I could
literally
talk
just
longer
said you make
faster than you.
stuff
So
up.
what he's doing is making cases up. He said the first case. I looked up the case. It turned out he was wrong. We will painstakingly go through the rest of the cases. He's going to argue that cases were thrown out because DNA degradation proved they couldn't be the last person to handle a weapon. So we're going to go through each of these cases. Show me the first case. Go ahead.
No, you're again restating. I said that people
That's
were
the
found
point.
not guilty because
the
of the
point.
degradation.
No, that means that they didn't have enough DNA that was compelling. There is no evidence whatsoever, as you've argued, in the medical literature that says that degraded DNA means that you weren't last person to handle the gun. You've acknowledged that. That's the important issue here. Saying that there were some cases that were thrown out because of problems
Rob,
with
do you
DNA, of
understand the
course,
difference
we agree with
between
that.
handling the
I have
gun
another
and
question.
pushing the
I have
trigger?
another
Do you
question
know the
for you.
difference?
Please stop interrupting.
I'd like to
I have
get
a
other
question.
people in here, by
I
the
have
way,
another
Rob, and not
question
just
for you.
the Rob
You
and Joe
just keep
show, but-
interrupting, so I can't get through my point. I have another question for you. You
You
said
asked
that
me a question, dude.
you said that he had the least evidence on the trigger. Can you prove that? Where did they say that?
The ATF officer said he
Show
had the
me.
most degraded.
No. That's a
degraded
different
DNA
claim.
on the trigger.
That's a different claim. You said other people had more DNA on the trigger. Show me where they said that.
Well, if his is the most degraded, he has the least amount.
That's
of
not. Do you
DNA.
understand that degraded doesn't mean the least? They said he had the most by 1 in a trillion. Can you show me where they made the claim?
Do you understand?
Can
the
you show me
difference
where they
between
made the
a
claim that he
trigger
had the
and
least DNA on the trigger?
Rob,
Show me.
if I can speak.
Oh, you don't like being
interrupted?
interrupted, Coley?
There's-
It's a little frustrating, isn't it? Go
You
ahead.
asked
I'll
me a
interrupt
question.
7 or 8 more times. Go ahead.
I think you.
Yeah,
and
you
your
know,
team should
see,
go
you were
back to
kind of wrong
debating
about that, huh?
Hooter
You were talking
waitresses,
out
'cause
your
it works
ass.
out better for
You were
guys,
lying.
because you can't even
Now I'll
debate
sit
on
back
spaces.
and let you finish, but it's a little frustrating, isn't it? Go ahead.
Okay,
He's
so
really
now
going to
let
need
me-
a CPAP machine tonight. He's going to need to turn
Yeah,
his
Smith, just
CPAP
Is that the
matching
guy
your
that
energy,
worries about my
fellas. Just
nuts?
I know
Let me
it would be
understand-
nice
let me-
if you didn't scream like that,
Just
because
matching
honestly,
your
it's
energy.
really
Okay,
doing
guys,
to me.
guys.
You're tone policing.
Let me
Give
let me
answer the
understand it
question.
for you,
One
okay?
second, chill.
Because you don't
chill. Go ahead,
understand
Joe.
it.
Go ahead, Joe.
You don't understand that. There's a difference between a gun, DNA on a gun, and DNA on a trigger and trigger guard. The expert measured the trigger and trigger guard as one thing and the rest of gun. So when you say he has the majority of DNA on the gun, he does. That is correct. He does not have the majority of the
Show me
DNA
where
on
they
the
said that.
trigger and
Show me
trigger
where they
guard.
said that.
That's what you're lying about.
Show me where they said that.
Okay,
Go
I'll
ahead,
go
it should be
look
easy.
while Solomon goes to other people. I'll show you.
Good. And we're going to wait and put a pin in that, everyone. He's going to show that the ATF said he had the least amount of DNA on the trigger.
No,
and the trigger.
I'm going to show you that he said the most degraded on the
Degraded
trigger.
is
Don't put words in
different
my
than
mouth
saying
again.
had the least amount. Those are two different claims. You don't understand what degraded means.